Science should supersede over politics all the time, every time.
In Sydney, at certain times in summer, we're told not to turn on our dishwashers at night because of a lack of reserve margin in the Sydney grid around evening peak. You wouldn't expect that should happen in a first world energy abundant grid, yet it's happening in Sydney, right? Snowy Hydro 2 at an original cost of $2.5 billion, I think is now at $14 billion. Chancellor Merz has recently called that the greatest strategic mistake Germany's ever made. Microsoft spending, agreeing to fund a future PPA of $20 billion to get those megawatts back. Now, funnily enough, that restart is on time. Nuclear energy is basically the only...
Before we get started, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode of our cutting-edge contemporary conversations. Thank you.
Welcome, Jonathan. How are you?
G'day, Dev. Good. Great to be here.
Thank you for your time. It's very interesting times we are living in today. And want to get your views on everything energy. But before we go there, if you can tell me your story, how have you evolved into this person who was, focusing on that piece of work and energy so much?
Right, so as you know, I currently run a uranium business that's listed on the stock market of Australia with a focus on Western Australia. Prior to then, and the reason I came to that role is I have a bit of a background, I guess, across the radioactive spectrum. I was involved in the nuclear industry in the UK, and then I also had a key role in approving and building the radioactive waste repository that is now operating in Western Australia. Fantastic asset. It's called the Tellus Sandy Ridge facility. And so I guess it's a bit of a unique experience across different parts of the value chain, right? From mining, energy production and waste. And so the role with Tellus, where we got approval to put radioactive waste in the ground at a time when removing radiation from the ground, uranium mining is banned. We got approval to put more in the ground. Now that required all sorts of change of policies for WA government, and so right now I'm focused on changing the policy for uranium mining. Well, I've kind of already done something similar with Tellus, so that gives me a little bit of confidence about how we go about doing it, some of the complexities, and some of the success factors.
I would like you to go a bit more back as younger days. When did you become a science nerd?
I was always been a science nerd. Yeah, maths and science nerd. It's as far back as primary school. Absolutely, in Perth. Grew up in Perth.
And how was that growing up? Which school did you went to? And then what did you? What triggered this being a science nerd? You were not born science nerd. Nobody's born a science nerd.
I think my parents are both scientifically minded. Okay, I'd say, and got a bit of natural talent from that, I guess. Went to a high school in Perth that someone would probably know, and then, funnily enough, though, at university, I studied law commerce, so not science. But I got so bored in first year commerce that I dropped a few units and took up chemistry because I had a natural interest in it, and the commerce, the introduction commerce courses were really boring. And since then, I went on to do finance and other things, but always retained an interest.
The broader conversation on energy is very much. Some people say it is radical, but it's difficult to have that long form conversation because I think you can't give titles or labels to every form of energy and then just disregard the whole energy and all the opportunities it brings without understanding the risks can be managed as well. Before we go there into specific energy mix, why do you think having a long form conversation to explain the argument, explain the science, explain the opportunities and risks and detailed understanding for the community at large is more important before we start thinking about this is the solution?
Yeah, so I think it is energy assets, energy infrastructure and energy strategy, they're long-term things, right? And they don't work to a 3-year federal or 4-year state election cycle. And there is a lot of commentary at the moment about the appropriateness of Australia's energy policy. And I don't give the current government too many free kicks on that. But to be fair to them a little bit, that is an energy policy which has its origins in prior governments, including prior Liberal governments. So my point there, I guess, is that energy policy has been messed up in this country for a very long time. And it is not a short-term fix, although there are things that we can start to do and hopefully can flow through various election cycles. Unfortunately, energy policy in Australia is it's very politicised and polarised, and it shouldn't be, but that's the case. I think when we look at what are the main concerns for energy policy, there are a couple of factors that overlie everything. And that one was the issue around decarbonisation and lowering emissions is something that fundamentally changed people's views on what was needed for energy policy. But the second thing now that's coming into play is that for the first time in living memory for you and I, energy demand across the economy is going up.
Yeah.
So since, I'm well into my 40s, but for the last 20, 30 years, energy demand across developed economies has been flat, if not declining, because of deindustrialisation. Now it's ticking up with electrification driven by decarbonisation as well as AI, and you are now going to have some different requirements around how much energy we need, which again will go and factor into our energy policy.
I think the flatlining, and then because the next industrial revolution, which is the AI, to capture that revolution, you need to produce more energy.
Yep.
One should not think about energy surplus, but energy abundance.
Yes.
And do you think an energy policy takes at least a decade to trickle down and then have some meaningful, tangible impact on energy supply side? So how do you see that? Because, if you haven't done too much in the last 20 years, what do you see as the critical things to be thought of today so that one could safeguard the economic growth probably a decade from now? Yeah,
so I think other countries are doing a lot better than Australia is. And one of those is, stop demonising electricity sources that have served us well in the past, understanding that they may not meet one of those pillars, which is the decarbonisation objectives, but it become increasingly important with the energy abundance objective. And so that is, coal and gas. They have roles to play, and people are beginning to realise that, for example, removing coal from the NEM, the Australian grid, is hard, and coal will probably be with us for a lot longer than ideologues probably are desired. And the second thing is that gas will play a key role going forward, because at the moment Australia has, and for the foreseeable future, Australia's decided not to build reactors here, and so gas is a critical part in the future generation mix.
From a point of view of energy mix, which is to be from state by state, the energy requirements are changing and evolving, and every state has different mix of what input side or supply side, whether it's coal, gas, they use. One is there is no parity. Not everybody using the same thing across all states and territories. For example, Tasmania has more hydro, and every state has a different mix of energy on the supply side. If one has to demonize one form of source of energy, but we don't have a standard solution everywhere, whereas out of 7 state and territories, its Labour government or same political ideology is on one side, but the energy mix is not same across all those 7. So how do you see that dichotomy of two different things?
That's an interesting perspective. So if we consider the overall plan that brings together those disparate sort of state energy plans is the AEMO Integrated System Plan. Now, what the ISP is meant to do is says, well, we have to reflect in the plan, glorified big spreadsheet, any specific state goals or policy targets, right? So a good example is that Victoria mandated 9 gigawatts of offshore wind. And therefore the AEMO ISP includes it because they have to meet those government objectives. The trick is, though, if you look at an optimisation of lowest cost, you would never build offshore wind in Australia. We've got, regardless of your views on wind, we've got plenty of space for onshore wind and other things. Offshore is very expensive. And yet the AEMO ISP must include it because it's a policy target of a state government. That's the justification. I think that's a little bit erroneous, or at least the AEMO ISP has been sold to the public as doing something it doesn't do, because they say, oh, well, this is the lowest cost transition we can make. Well, it's not. It's a transition which meets every government policy without saying, you know what, we shouldn't do that part because that part's really expensive. And if we swapped it out with something else, it would lower the overall cost of the transition. So, yeah, there is a natural tension there. You've seen Queensland in its latest update now admit that coal is going to be in the system, I think, until 2049. You've seen Erang here in Sydney extend another 2 years, and with a little asterisk after that, frankly, to see how much longer it stays online. You know, we'll see when Snowy 2 finally comes online to provide a bit of firming to the intermittent sources.
There was a fancy video made by Minister Bowen at Hydro 2. I don't know whether you saw that video. There's a very flashy video of, you know, everything is going well in Snowy Hydro 2.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, there was. I think I might show you after this.
Yeah, so Snowy Hydro 2 at an original cost of $2.5 billion, I think is now at $14 billion, and years late. So,
so project management 101.
Yep.
You have. It's called theory of constraints. 3 constraints: time, cost, and quality. So if a project, you know, fails on one ground, it fails.
Yep.
And then if project goes how many times? 7 times.
Yes, roughly.
Roughly 6 times the estimated. I'm not saying who's to blame, but, you know, either the feasibility was done wrong at a lower estimate,
yes,
or you know, we have grossly, you know, underestimated the amount of work it takes.
So I think with Snowy there was some issues with the geotechnical conditions when you're tunnelling and you hit different rocks than you expected. Yeah, that's a problem. I would want to take a step back from that. Kind of don't have an issue in some way that Snowy's gone so over budget, because things do.
Yeah.
The ideological issue there is that it seems okay for Labor for Snowy to go so far over budget, yet the reason that one of the many reasons that they argued against the nuclear industry is that you can't build them on time or budget. And yet, if you point out, well, why aren't you arguing the same about Snowy? Oh, well, that's fine. So I would just like to see, I'd like to see ideology get out of the way of energy policy. It should not constrain energy policy. All of the above approach, energy abundance, and long-term sensible planning.
In terms of the whole energy mix, again, you know, I understand from a nuclear power point of view. What are the global trends? Which countries are trialing and using in terms of safety and in terms of usage? Cost per kilowatt of production. How are they looking in terms of you know, in a short term and a longer term view? Yeah,
so you might often hear the term the nuclear renaissance, relatively new thing, and that would be aimed at the Western market. So nuclear growth in the West, collective West, is quite a new thing. However, let's take 2 steps backwards. Nuclear has been growing strongly in China and India for the past decades. So whilst the West sort of shut up shop, they've been growing very strongly, and they have
I think
built
parts of Africa.
A couple of bits of Africa are looking there, using generally Russian technology actually. But the key to building, as with any big industry, the key to building on time and budget is to have a supply chain and a continuous production line to get those efficiencies. And that's what China and India and Russia have continued to do. So that's one thing. That's a trend that's been there for a while. What's the new trend is the West deciding we want to get back in the game, but we've let all our supply chains go, and so they need to be rebuilt. And you're
capabilities.
You're going to have a few missteps along the way. And for example, the Vogtle reactors in the US, the sort of the first of a kind AP1000s, you know, they got stuck in COVID and all sorts of stuff and took years longer, as did the first EPR production out of Europe. So where you've seen the West starting to kick goals is life extensions to existing reactors, many going from 40 to 60 to 80 years, cheapest. The cheapest nuclear megawatts you can get, life extend an existing reactor. You've then had restarts occurring, and they've been quite high profile, right? Like the biggest one there would be 3 Mile Island, which did suffer a partial meltdown in 1979, not the reactor that's been restarted, the one next door. But, you know, Microsoft spending or agreeing to fund a future PPA of $20 billion to get those megawatts back. Now, funnily enough, that restart is on time. Well, it's actually on budget and ahead of time. So you're starting to see the West be able to do that. Now, the next step is is building big reactors from scratch. Westinghouse has come out with a plan to build 10 more AP1000s, so they're 1 gigawatt reactors. And there are the Koreans building their APRs, which are similar to the APs, consistently. So that's and then the step that next gets more media attention because it's so cool is SMRs or smaller modular reactors. Now, they have a little bit of a disadvantage because nuclear is a great game for economies of scale.
Yeah.
SMRs do have these nice ideas of being modular and you can build them in a factory and therefore get factory line efficiency. My point I often talk to people is I like to use the word LMR, large modular reactor. Why don't we build large reactors in modular pieces and bolt them together on site? And that's exactly what the Chinese do to deliver their efficiencies. So they have the Westinghouse has the AP1000. China now has the CAP1000, the Chinese AP, and they just build the same thing differently and they build it on time and on budget. So that's where we've got to get to.
That's another trend of tech giants getting into energy production.
Yeah.
How do you, and then many more other, they are putting their foot down, and also tech giants getting into because they have data infrastructure.
Yep.
So they are working on that. So how do you see that trend moving into energy from tech?
Yeah, so this is a fantastic, interesting trend. So the first times where I mentioned that Microsoft paid a lot of money to reopen 3 Mile Island, and there are a couple of other, Dwayne Arnold and others, where tech companies are restarting existing plants. The thing is, the US regulation won't allow them to take that energy straight from the plant. They've got to put it into the grid and then draw it off the grid, because having those megawatts on the grid can be important. So tech giants absolutely want to build new ones from scratch right next to their data centres, because then they won't incur grid costs. And of the price of energy, grid costs are over half generally more than the cost of generation. So in tech companies' views, it is very, very cost effective to build their own plants next door, so they don't have to impact the grid. That's really interesting, because when you see the tech companies begin to move in to the nuclear industry, and I was at the Nuclear Fuel Buyers Conference, which was held in Sydney last year. The fuel buying industry is really interesting. It's a slow moving, doing the same thing day in, day out that we've done for 50 years. Don't fix what's not broken. And there will be tech companies coming in suddenly, not only competing for fuel, but competing for nuclear engineers, will shake up the industry. And tech companies aren't happy doing things on time frames that the nuclear industry might have previously done. And that is very exciting. From a uranium production perspective, it's very exciting because you expect tech to come down the chain like they've done in lithium. And you will expect them to buy the fuel or the raw uranium in different contractual manners. And that will allow, and you saw this in the iron ore industry, where with the rise of the Chinese iron ore industry, the contracting structure materially changed. And you've seen it in LNG as the LNG market matured over 50 years. You see different contractual mechanisms for buying and hedging their exposure, and that's brilliant for the industry. So very exciting.
I think the next logical step because these tech giants are also consuming a lot of water to have desal plants. So if you have a large energy source and then be near the sea and then just have a desal plant and then and then have data centers together. Because right now people are putting up data centers in the city, which should not be the case, because a lot of water being consumed.
And those standalone technology parks, if you will, are a model that are being pursued in the US and otherwise. And in Australia, there are a number of tech companies trying to build out our AI and data center infrastructure. If you listen to Craig Scroggie from NextDC, who's call him a bit of the Steve Jobs of the data center industry. If you have the opportunity to see one of Craig's presentations, I recommend. It's quite evangelical. He's a strong supporter of even if it takes time, Australia has to get on that curve, because his business right now is constrained. He cannot grow as fast as he wants to grow, not because of the fibre optic cables linking Australia. We're pretty well networked. It's we cannot support the electricity generation.
And that's probably the next conversation on to be a sovereign from a point of view of data sovereignty, energy production. I think this all is intertwined: data, AI sovereignty, and energy sovereignty.
Yeah, energy security. I mean, hasn't that come to the fore given what's happening in the Middle East?
Yeah.
Currently, there's obviously no any easy solution to energy security except see what we've got domestically, and let's not demonise it, and let's not use it. Australia is blessed. Look, Australia has a lot of area for solar. We've got a lot of coastline for wind. There are issues with both of those, but they can play a major role. But we also have significant gas reserves, significant coal reserves, and the world's largest uranium reserves. We should not have constraints on energy in this country, and obviously we do, from decisions that have been made 20 plus years ago. There's been a bit in the media recently about decisions to, who was responsible, who should bear the blame for closing Australia's fuel refining capacity. Probably a mix of everyone. But, it is a scary situation now where, I don't care what I read in the media, diesel has been rationed right now. So we are at the moment mobilising a team, this is all public knowledge, mobilising a team to site for our annual exploration program. We got rationed on our diesel. Now, if we can't get diesel, we can't operate. You've got mine sites in Western Australia. The mine sites in Western Australia run the economy. They did not shut during COVID. They kept, frankly, Australia's economy moving. Mine sites are shutting down in WA because they can't get diesel. That's a scary prospect. And funnily enough, there's the long-term solution to reliance on diesel. People have tried sort of remote solar battery storage. The solution to the diesel grid, funnily enough, is probably micro-reactors. Bringing in a shipping container that you only have to refuel every 5 to 10 years powers your entire mine site. Brilliant.
Again, because the vastness of the country is too big, and these smaller communities run on, need energy, and then they use diesel and of those sorts. Considering that the geography is so vast, we can't electrify through connectivity of the networks and all of that stuff. So how do you see the future of energy growth? Or economic growth.
I just want to hit on that point. So Australia is a vast country, right? Yet we're fairly concentrated in our population, but large areas, and that means large transmission. But what people also need to remember when you look at us versus other high penetration renewable grids, like maybe Germany or California, is we don't have interconnection. So Germany was able to switch off its nuclear plants. Chancellor Merz has recently called that the greatest strategic mistake Germany's ever made. And being Germany, they made a few of them. But they've got the benefit of backup and black start capacity and interconnection. Half that, the German grid is still connected into French nuclear, for example, or Swedish. So we have to stand alone. And again, that's quite different, for example, to California, that also has high renewables penetrations, and Spain as well, that is connected to the pan-European grid. So that is Australia's vastness is a benefit, it's a curse as well. And so you've always got to you consider those kind of things.
It's a fairly well-researched fact that economic growth of a country is closely linked to energy consumption per capita. And if it grows, consumption per capita, the economic growth is towards the upward end. And then how do you see that curve either flatlining or going up?
Well, you look at the modelling in the AMO ISP, which I don't yet think fully reflects the potential impacts of AI and then everything else like that. We've got a bit of an issue in Australia that if we all want to electrify and reduce our emissions, can we build a grid that is sustainable and provide enough abundant energy at a cheap price to satisfy those conditions? And yes, you say energy consumption per capita is an important metric, but also for growth, the real cost of energy is a huge issue.
The input cost.
It's something where Australia, 20 years ago, we had cheap energy in this country, backbone of obviously domestic coal. We don't have cheap energy anymore, and it's continuing to go the wrong way. And that impacts, it's a really insidious impact on inflation, because the cost of energy affects everything in our daily lives, from the cost of your coffee to the cost of your rent, to the cost of your food and your refrigeration of the food chain. Everything has a big impact on from the cost of energy. And energy price inflation over the last 15, 20 years has massively outstripped the cost of CPI inflation, hugely so. We'd hopefully be able to get that back down to the CPI line. We've got a lot of work to do.
Are there any case studies globally in which people have gone full on, very hardcore on solar and wind with battery storage, and what have they experienced? Are there case studies globally?
Yes, so it's important to put a boundary condition in there. So when we talk about high penetration renewables, you do need to remove hydro, which is a baseline source.
Yeah.
We would love to have more hydro capacity in Australia. Unfortunately, we're a flat country with not a lot of water. So if you look at all the countries with the highest penetration of renewables, they tend to be very high hydro. So and that's great, and lucky them. I guess the same as geothermal, which would be the biggest one, would be Iceland. So when we look then at high penetration intermittent renewables, you've got Spain, Germany trying to do things, and then grids like California. How have they gone? Well, obviously, Spain had a bit of an issue last year, let's call it that, such that Spain is currently in the process of phasing out their last nuclear plants. There are mass protests across Spain to try and extend or reverse that decision. Germany has recently admitted what we all knew, that closing those nuclear plants was a strategic error. In fact, also the EU, Ursula, the head of the EU, who was in the German government at the time and did vote for the closure of them, she's also now admitted that. Funnily enough, you've also had Taiwan close down its nuclear reactors, the last of which closed last year. They then had a referendum on reopening them. Less than, I think, 10 months after the last one closed, they actually had a referendum on reopening. That referendum got something like, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but directionally they're right, got something like 73% approval to reopen them, but the hurdle in the legislation was 75%. So whilst there was massive support to reopen them, didn't quite get there, and that was 2 or 3 months ago. And even now, there's now a push again to reopen those reactors because energy security and energy abundance is coming back to the fore, and people understand that technology, has a really important role to play.
Coming back to the next industrial revolution, which is driven through data and AI, to capture that next round of economic growth, productivity gains, and all of those positive things, our economy should be ready to achieve that and to maintain the standard of living as well in the next 2 decades to come. What are the core pillars to achieve that so that one could be part of that, the next revolution? Yeah,
I think if to stay focused on the energy grid, you need to plan for an energy grid that has abundance at its core. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to overbuild 5 gigs of reactors or new plants or whatever and have it sitting there doing nothing. But you do have a real option issue there, and you go, sort of build it and they will come, I guess. But you will never know the cost to your society of the opportunities that are foregone if developers and businesses and proponents in industry are not confident that they can get the power they need. And that's exactly what Craig Scroggie is saying. He's like, well, we can't grow as fast as we need here. We're focusing on other areas. Now, if he was confident that the Aussie grid was robust, resilient, and had abundant available energy in the build out plan for the next 5-10 years, well, they'd be able to do more. So that has a cost. That has a cost to it. That the current plan, which is throwing renewables together with some storage to just meet what we might need, although those projections don't even include growth from AI. We're being constrained in that. So I think we need a fundamental reset in the way we think about the role of energy abundance in our future economic growth, because otherwise we do lose out. And if we look across the Pacific to the US, and let's try and keep the man at the top out of the picture, because I don't need personal politics about personalities. Even before Trump, so Biden recognised the role of nuclear energy. In fact, he wanted to triple it, and Trump's decided to one up him, says he wants to quadruple it. Nuclear energy is basically the only bipartisan supported thing in US politics at the moment. And, we're going to have, and we already have companies that go, oh, well, we'll go over where there's an all of the above approach, where we know we can get cheap power now, but also in the future. We've got confidence of it. And I think, I think Australia's on a hiding to nowhere on it, unfortunately.
Whether it's nuclear or whether it's whichever source of energy, to create energy abundance or security, we are just leading up to pre-budget and budget conversation. Are you hearing anything on new projects or creating more energy abundance conversation from a federal government level?
Well, so something very interesting happened yesterday from a state perspective, and that is New South Wales has just banned all new coal projects on greenfield sites in New South Wales. You can still do brownfields expansion, but you cannot build a new coal mine on a greenfield site. Now, at a time where we are in the midst of an energy crisis, one that honestly has no clear time frame. It could be a week, it could be years of a solution. I think it's a curious time to start demonising baseload energy sources. We have a policy sort of federally that is reflected by commercial in that coal is shutting down in Australia. Now, coal is shutting down because coal generators can't make money because of long-term policy decisions that have been made around the way we want to set up our grid. So the sort of anti-coal or pro-renewables lobby will say, oh, well, coal's shutting down because they can't make money. They can't make money because of the way that bidding into the grid occurs. Now, let me give you an example. The way the NEM works is that every 6 minutes increments, so 10 increments an hour, a generator can bid. And the lowest bid wins that slot. And during the day, where the cost of solar energy can almost go negative, they can bid very low. Obviously, solar can't bid at night, and therefore you're reliant on storage. So the maths works this way. What we end up paying, because of the way that the NEM works, is the sum of the lowest bid for each 6 minute increment. Okay, that's the cost. That is not mathematically the way to lower to make sure the cost over the 24-hour period is lowest. Because of the cost of intermittency. And we could reform the NEM bidding rules such that the cost of intermittency was, in at least a part or fully, borne by the intermittent generator, which is causing the requirement to handle the intermittency. That hasn't happened yet. If that were done, well, hey, you know what? For the chunk of demand that is our base load, well, then coal would become a lot more profitable, and therefore coal generators could undertake, longer term maintenance cycles. They could refresh capital. They could plan to be in business for 10 to 20 years, as they may well be in Queensland. And then they can start having a business case. Right now they find it very hard, so they're closing down. I think we are still going to see more changes to this generation and energy strategy as God forbid we start having blackouts especially in Sydney in the next couple of years.
And that's what one should not have blackouts, but the blackouts in South Australia is a case study of what can and can't go wrong. What's your observation on that case study from South Australia where there were blackouts in the recent years?
So blackouts, caused by a confluence of factors, including a shutdown of the interconnector. Yeah. South Australia has high renewables penetration, except when it doesn't, then it has a big fat interconnector into Victorian coal. And when that went down and it caused system stability issues and everything, well, there you go. So South Australia has had some successes from their renewable energy rollout, no doubt. They've also had some real failures. They still continue to have the highest retail power prices in Australia because, as I mentioned previously, the cost of generating the power is a minority. It's not the majority cost of your retail bill stack, right? You've got transmission in there.
Yeah.
You've got hedging costs, which when you have intermittent energy, your hedging costs are higher.
Yeah.
And then you have the cost of subsidies effectively built in there as well. So South Australia has always had high energy costs because it's a fairly large state and a low population. But renewable energy hasn't really helped that. In fact, it's possibly made it worse. You don't live in Sydney, do you, Dev? In
Western Australia.
Yeah. So WA's got its own issues with the grid. In Sydney, at certain times in summer, we're told not to turn on our dishwashers at night or our washing machines and dryers because of a lack of reserve margin in the Sydney grid around evening peak. It is a curious thing where, power rationing happens. And obviously peak times with air conditioners and everything else these days are sort of shifting into the evening, stuff like that. You wouldn't expect that should happen in a first world energy abundant grid, yet it's happening in Sydney right now, and it's projected to get worse, which is why error-ing has been extended again.
The case to build nuclear power plants was put to Australians in the last federal election. How do you see what are the telltale signs of because you don't get too many shots at delivering a good reasoning that why should we go nuclear, why should we lift up the moratorium, and why should we go on that pathway of adding nuclear to your energy mix. So how do you see that last?
Yeah, you'll understand. I've got some views on this. To take a positive out of it, I think it's the first time in history that the nuclear safety argument was actually won by the nuclear side. So you saw at the start of the campaign the three-eyed fish memes and stupid Simpsons paraphernalia. Labor stopped that pretty quickly because they realised it didn't work. For the first time, the Australian public didn't fall for that. So tick. Now, is that on the back of AUKUS with people realising they're going to have floating reactors off their coast anyways, or on the back of they seeing what is happening globally? Don't know. But that side won. That won. Now, where Labor were incredibly clever was saying, but the cost and the time frame, and then say, we're going to have to cut your Medicare to pay for reactors. Untrue, but incredibly, incredibly effective. So, props to the Labor strategists for that. The cost of the proposed Labor cost of nuclear energy rollout at $600 billion was literally a fantasy dreamt up by the renewables industry lobby, but was adopted through some very, very clever campaigning, and I think, frankly, through the mainstream media not questioning the origins of those numbers and the veracity of them. But anyways, that's what defined that part of the campaign. So that policy was very poorly delivered at the end of the day by Liberals, not helped by a whole lot of other factors around that campaign that were terrible. So, yes, you don't have often chances to do this. There were a few wins. Where I would like to see a policy move is a common sense one, which would say, let's just start with removing the bans. Now, there are bans at federal level on building nuclear reactors for power purposes. There's also bans on enrichment. We would also say that there are bans at state level that should be removed, and separately, and one of my main passions is removing bans on uranium mining. Now, not only could that possibly help future domestic energy security, but uranium mining is this critical aspect for Australia, for energy security, but you may not realise why. Our global trading partners are desperate for uranium at the moment. They are building reactors. They do not. There's bifurcation in the uranium market. They do not want to buy uranium from the likes of Kazakhstan or Russia or frankly Africa. They want high ESG, strategically aligned uranium, and there is a massive shortage of it forecast. So Australia has the largest uranium reserves in the world. If we stepped up and exported more uranium to our key strategic partners, that is a massive, massive card we can play in trade negotiations to provide better outcomes on crazy trade deals with the US that Trump wants to do or whatever. We can say, well, we can give you uranium. Now,
you give us your IP or on the power plants.
Anything. And it doesn't need to be nuclear related. Say, look, we will, we'll give you uranium, but you give us bloody access to our beef markets again, or, to, live lobster exports, or whatever it is. That uranium card is incredibly strategically important to our to our partners. And Australia is very, very, very good at controlling where our uranium goes. It can only be used for civilian purposes. So you're not allowed to use it for military purposes. So we don't have to worry about Australian uranium being used to proliferate nuclear weapons or anything like that. It cannot happen. Australia is literally the best in the world at doing that. Yet, the likes of the US, the likes of the EU, Japan, Korea, these are countries where we need bargaining power in our trading relationships, right? And we have that card, and Mr. Albanese won't play it. And he won't play it because, unfortunately, this distinction between uranium for export and nuclear energy domestically, he's scared that if he supports uranium for export, he thinks that will somehow undermine his opposition to nuclear energy in Australia. Now, my very clear point I want to get across to people is they are two separate issues, and Australia can export uranium in the near term to our strategic partners. We can get an immense amount of national benefits from that, and there probably does need to be a bit of work that the government can help us with, and industry can do that too, to say this is separate from building reactors in Australia. And we can deal with the reactors in Australia down the line. I would say, though, that there's no harm right now, as we should export more uranium. We should just overturn bans. We should get some regulations in place that mean that if we do want to make the decision around building reactors, and if they're commercially, if there's a good track record internationally of new build out in the West, and there are developers coming and they can do the preparations and there's a business case, that we can move quickly. So there are things that we can do now, don't cost a lot of money, that only take a bit of time. Why don't we do those now?
Is there, so another lesson learned from that political campaign on nuclear probably could be not to merge the nuclear whole campaign on energy with the political cycle.
Yes.
Have it somewhere in between so that, you can limit the repercussions of, you can do midway, you can run a referendum or, run another big campaign just without the political repercussions, so that the people who are at the top of the leadership are not scared that they will lose their own seat.
Yes.
In some way or form. But again, people have that much appetite to repeat the same conversation within a short period. But and on the other flip side, we don't have that much time to create energy abundance.
Yep.
So from a timing point of view, to be strategic, the lifting the ban is a conversation on advocacy at the political level only, or is a conversation of advocacy at whole society level?
Yeah, I as part of and again, it shouldn't be this political discussion, but I did do a lot of advocacy So I didn't agree with many parts of the Liberal, the 6 sites or whatever it was strategy, and I said it was badly delivered. But I did spend time in community where they were to be the most affected communities, i.e. the sites that the Liberals had, in their wisdom, decided they'd build them there. And it was really interesting seeing, and those community evenings were quite well attended by obviously one-eyed nuclear supporters, one-eyed anti-nuclear campaigners, but also people that were curious and interested to learn more. So it was really interesting to spend time with those people and learn what those concerns were and see what information they needed to make a decision either way. And what I saw there was a lot more openness to consider things, frankly, than you've previously seen. You'd seen a lot of the concerns that people raised might have been valid for nuclear technology that existed 50 years ago, but not valid for any technology that we might roll out in Australia in a civilian context. So, yes, there needs to be a continued discussion in the community about it over time, as part of maybe lifting a ban process. But it's not something that, forcing something on a community is very difficult. It's fraught with danger, and it sort of, certainly plays into the arms of the other side if you do that. So, the nuclear in Australia would be a long-term solution as we build out, as I said, on all of the above things, and again, stop demonising things like gas and coal, and concentrate on building things where we have a competitive advantage.
Other thing we talked initially is the longevity of the energy policy. It takes time to implement and then get everything in fruition, and the 3-year term is fairly short from a federal point of view. So what? And then people don't have that longevity that they would come back in power again. So at least 3 consecutive terms is a good enough time period to set the country very well for energy abundant future. But how do you share that vision as a leader of the party on both sides with the country? That I will do this, it'll take 3 terms. You have to re-elect me for the next 3 terms because the other party will take it away. Yeah,
let me answer that in a slightly different way. But this time frame thing, right? One of the most popular policies in Australian energy sector with the public has been rooftop solar. And that has been, let's say, 20 years. So what's that, 6 terms. Now, funnily enough, and again, some people might not be unhappy with me when I say this, rooftop solar is now causing real issues for the grid because the grid still has costs associated with it. And if people aren't using the grid, someone still has to pay for it. You need minimum system loads and all sorts of stuff. And so and on top of that, while people say, rooftop solar is cheap, well, rooftop solar is cheap because the government subsidises it. The cost of the panels have come down, yes, but the cost of your labourers to go up on your own roof and in what is a difficult, usually a difficult installation process, and then put your own small little converter down, inverter downstairs with your, and then
in the garage,
and wrap it into your own switchboard, and then have a small battery associated with it. All of that is actually really expensive on a per megawatt basis versus, say, putting a large solar, efficient large bloody thing with a large battery next to it, hooking up to the grid. And so it's funny where something that was really well-meaning 20 years ago actually causing real issues now. And I think that's an example of where you never know where the impacts of those policy decisions. The impacts of policy decisions take a long time to fully bear out, and you should make changes along the way to avoid these things. So for example, one of the questions with rooftop solar is now you're seeing on the grid that connection fees for the grid. So on your retail bill, your connection fee, which you pay independent of how much power you draw from the grid, is now going up and up and up and up, because it's the only way they can pay for maintenance on the grid. people are drawing less megawatts from the grid, but they've still got to maintain it. So they've got to beef up. That's one thing that's happening. The second thing that the subsidies that the government still provides on rooftop solar provides perverse price signals to the market. So you could see, and the new cheaper home battery scheme is not helping with respect to the issue of minimum demand on the grid. So you can see changes that are needed around grandfathering in stuff. So, people still get their benefits that they've, if they've invested in them, but maybe new homes have a different system or whatever. The energy system policy needs to better take account of these things. And I think we are still maintaining a very popular policy because it's popular with the electorate, not necessarily the best thing for the grid.
If I'll make you energy minister and commit to you that you will be the energy minister for the next 3 terms, what are the things federally you would focus on, and then what are the projects you will undertake?
I would, and this is a tricky way to frame it, but
guarantee you 3 terms.
Yeah.
So 3-term guarantee.
Right. So I would make sure energy policy is far more balanced to providing energy abundance. Yes, reduction in emissions, I think, over time is important. But I feel there's no balance in the current approach with regards to economic growth and economic well-being for the country. So, we have lost, and we are at danger of losing even more of our energy-intensive industries because of the policy that has been put forward. So I would, number one, make that much more balanced. Number 2, again, I'm not sure how much of the policies of the past you might be able to unpick. A particular issue there is the capacity investment scheme, which, so we've had LGCs, large generation certificates, we've now going into the CIS, which is an extraordinarily expensive and open-ended checkbook for the government for renewable generators. And I think that is something that I would like to see certainly greater transparency on. And there have been some freedom of information requests and other things in recent months to try and get to the bottom of that. So far it looks like there are CIS projects that have won the CIS tick, so they've kind of got the CIS structure. Yet, as far as I know, and I'm very happy if anyone out there wants to prove me wrong, I don't think any of them made final investment decision yet. So, and that is what is underwriting this next phase of renewable generation that is expected to come in. So, the other thing I'd like to see, I guess, is a more level playing field. So, if including nuclear energy in there as a technology that's capable of getting CIS payments, for example, and obviously removing bans and whatnot. And I'd probably stop throwing money at green hydrogen. I think you need to know when to pull up stumps.
Science should supersede over politics all the time, every time. And facts should always supersede over politics or ideologies of any form. Whether it's the right or the left doesn't make a difference. What's the chemistry behind or maths behind the idea of net zero?
Oh, good question. And I'm not a climate scientist, right? So I try not to talk about net zero. I'll talk about emissions reduction and decarbonisation because at the simplest level, and going back to sort of simple pictures you might see, to the days of industrial revolution where you might see a steam train spewing out black smoke out of a chimney of a locomotive, right? And it looks like it was really thick black smoke. Probably not good. I don't think there's obviously no downside to the environment for improving emissions. That's great, and especially it's not just the carbon; it's all the other nasties that are in there, right? That's great. Whether it has to be net zero or not, I don't know. And so I have these. It's a disagreement on messaging, but the mantra that says we have to drop net zero. I think if you want to win an election, you have to win the middle. And dropping net zero as a term will appeal to your right. I don't think that's a term that really appeals to the middle, because the middle Australia are pretty sensible people. Why not go out with a message which says, and it would have to be much simpler than, decarbonisation, but not at the cost of the economy. Do something more sensible, more balanced. As to the maths of net zero, I'm not going to go there.
Fair enough. Yeah. In conclusion, people who are budding scientists / chemical engineers / mathematicians who are trying to get into the world of science and energy, in terms of academics, not just academics, what should they be focusing on beyond academics and understanding the global energy mix?
I would, and I've been pleasantly surprised actually. I have been asked to provide some lectures at a couple of universities recently and so I did the one down at ANU, for example. I was talking to the Masters in Nuclear Physics students, actually. I don't have a Masters in Nuclear Physics, to be clear. But I think it's a trend in universities where they get industry involvement in things. So back when I was in uni, and that was a long time ago, very much textbook related, not much practical. I did a finance degree. They didn't even teach us how to use Excel, for God's sake. I mean, Christ. So I think it is a good thing that the university is becoming more practical, and industry is you're getting more exposure as a student, getting more exposure to industry and real world environments. So I would encourage anyone that is currently at university to make themselves aware of that, because what I experienced when I left university is people think, oh, it's the end of your journey. It's like, no, it's the start of your next journey.
Yeah.
And actually back then, frankly, when you left university, you were pretty much useless. And maybe what your degree showed people is that you could actually apply yourself and learn something. But you were, at least in what I did, you were so dependent on getting real world experience to actually justify the salary they were paying you. So I would recommend everyone to get as much real world experience as they can.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.